The Paul Leslie Interviews.
We are welcoming trumpet, flugelhorn, and sometimes percussion player John Lovell, member of Jimmy Buffett's Coral Reefer Band, and member of the swing band Oop Bop Shabam. Thank you very much for speaking with me.
You're very welcome.
You started playing trumpet at 5 years old. Why did you like it?
Why did I like it? Well, because my dad played the trumpet, and that was my introduction, I guess. I guess it tells me I used to sit there and listen to him play at the house all the time because he played around the house a lot. So I guess I just took a liking to it.
And where were you born?
I was born in Indianapolis.
Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of music did you enjoy listening to growing up?
Well, growing up, it was pretty much the popular music of the day. My earliest recollection of listening to music was the Four Seasons, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, the Beach Boys, whatever sort of rock, popular music was happening at the time. But then, as I got a little bit older, out of grade school, toward the end of grade school and into the first part of high school, I started listening to a lot of my dad's records that he had laying around, big band records mainly, stuff like Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, Ray Anthony. He was big. My dad was really into Ray Anthony. So I started listening to those records, and then those records led to other records he had, which were a little bit more jazz-oriented. From there, I just became interested in jazz mainly.
Did you always know that you were destined to be a musician?
Yeah. That's all I've ever wanted to do. From a very early age, that's all I was ever interested in. Well, it's not all I was ever interested in, but that was my primary interest. We had a little record player. I used to play with the record player when I was 6, 7 years old. And when I wasn't doing that, I was beating on pots and pans. And when I wasn't doing that, I was trying to play the trumpet, I guess. So, yeah, it was a huge part of my life growing up.
Tell us about how you began playing with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra.
That came about some friends of mine in Indianapolis who I was working around town with. This one guy named Steve Rudolph, who's living in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania now. I don't know how he got the gig, but he got the call to go do the gig, and he was out for a couple of weeks, and they started needing other players, so he called me to see if I'd be interested in doing it, and I said, sure. No audition, just, okay, you'll do it, great. Here's your plane ticket. Here's our first gig. No rehearsal. You just show up, and you're on the gig, and they hand you a sport coat.
Wow.
and then you're playing.
That had to have been quite an experience.
It was. That was my first real, I guess, road experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Yeah, it was fun. it was fun while it lasted, but then it got old really quick.
Oh, yeah? Why is that?
Well, the conditions, this was like mid-'70s, and I don't know how they travel now, but back then we traveled on a Greyhound bus with just seats. It was not a tour bus. It wasn't a fancy tour bus that you see a lot of people travel on today. It's just an old Greyhound bus with seats. And everybody in the band got their own seat because there were like 15 people.
Yeah.
In the band. It's a large band. So you had your own seat, which was very uncomfortable. We were doing these ridiculous runs. Like we would play a lot of these jobs were 4-hour jobs. You'd go and play a dance from 9 to 1, or from 10 to 2, or from 8 to 12.
Wow.
And then after the dance, you'd get on the bus, and you would drive 500 miles to the next city. And then oftentimes there was a job that night, the very next night. So you check into your hotel room about 2 in the afternoon, grab about a 3-hour nap and a little bite to eat somewhere.
Wow.
And then have to go play another 4-hour job. Then you would have maybe a day off. And then it would be another 700 miles to the next job.
Wow.
It was crazy. I think I did that for about 4 months before everybody on the band got sick. There was some kind of flu bug going around. Nobody could take it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore because I wasn't getting better. I got the flu, and I just had it for like a week and a half, 2 weeks, and couldn't get rid of it. Nobody could get rid of it, so I just quit.
So how did you go from that to the OJs?
Well, let's see. I got off that, back to Indianapolis, and then another friend of mine named Harry Miedema happened to be touring with them. And again, it was just a question of, I guess they needed a trumpet player, and Harry was a friend of mine, knew I wasn't working, so he gave me a call. And that was the same thing. It was no rehearsal. You just show up and start playing. And did that for about three months, I guess, the summer tour. And that was toward the end of their heyday. We were playing 10,000, 15,000 seat arenas, which was exciting at the time. And we played with a bunch of great acts. We were always the headliner. They always headlined the act, because back then they were still headlining. They don't do that anymore, I think. But we played with a lot of great acts, like George Duke. We played with him for a few gigs, and this was back in the funk era, and his band would all dress up in cellophane and aluminum foil. Because they were trying to do the George Clinton kind of funkadelic type thing. I remember being backstage, and the horn players were all covered in aluminum foil. That was their outfit to go on stage. We played with a lot of I think we did a couple of gigs with George Clinton and all those acts back then. It was really cool.
Sounds like an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was. It was. And it was a great horn section because it was 4 trombones, 3 trumpets, and 1 sax. So it was really bottom heavy.
Right.
And we had a bass bone and 3 tenors. So it was kind of like it was a wild sound. It was huge. It was a huge sound. It was really sounded great.
So what brought you down to Miami, Florida?
Well, actually, I was getting ready to move to Philadelphia. My friend Jim Miller, who I'd mentioned before you. And I got a call from another friend of mine, Lindsey Blair, who I went to high school with in Indianapolis, and he had been attending University of Miami. And they were looking for a trumpet player to fill a spot in the concert jazz band there. So he called me, said that asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. I more than likely would be able to get a scholarship of some sort to go there. So I put a little tape together, a little resume, and sent it down to the jazz director there. And they called me back and asked me if I'd be interested in coming. They offered me a full scholarship. I could hardly pass that up.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah. So I packed my stuff and went down.
You played with a lot of artists like Tony Bennett, Benny E. King, and others, legends. Is there any in particular that sticks out in your mind?
Oh, Tony Bennett was really fantastic. And this was back when his career had sort of ebbed. A lot of people had forgotten about Tony Bennett. And he came to Miami and did a show at, I think it was the Deauville Hotel, or one of the older hotels on the beach. And I was working with a contractor at the time who gave me the call to do the gig, like he would call anybody. And he was just the most gracious person in the world. I mean, he was really a great person to work for. It was the total joy, and he brought his trio. They just contracted for other musicians, a complete big band with that around him. And we did 2 shows, I think, at the Deauville. He did all of his hits, got to play his book. It was great.
Wow.
And he was wonderful. It was wild because the success that he has now. I mean, he was nowhere near that at this time. He was pretty much forgotten about.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah, it is.
What kind of music has caught your ear lately, and what do you listen to?
Wow. Well, I listen to everything. Right now, I'm listening to, for example, Gerald Finzi. I listen to quite a bit of classical music. And so right now I'm listening to this sort of whole group of British composers, the Romantics from the early 19th century, Ralph Vaughan Williams, Arnold Bax, and lately Gerald Finzi. I just turned Peter on to some of this music of Gerald Finzi. It's very romantic. It's very lush harmonically. It's very tonal, but there's a lot of inner movement, inner voice movements, which is really interesting. It's beautiful music. So I listen to that, and I listen to, of course, I listen to jazz all the time too, but I think of some specific people I've been listening to lately. John Swanna, the trumpet player from Philadelphia. I listen to him quite a bit. Great jazz trumpet player that nobody knows about unless you're a musician. You know who he is, but he lives in Philly, and he goes back and forth to New York and plays jobs. He's pretty well known up in that area, but outside of that area, he's not very well known. He's a tremendously talented trumpet. And I listen to a lot of world music, a lot of Brazilian music. If it's good, I listen to it, and I seek out all genres. I mean, I just like everything.
Well, speaking of all genres, there's a lot of music out there that features trumpet. Not just jazz, and I know you are a jazz player, but you've also played Latin jazz and swing also. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite style to play?
Well, I really enjoy playing Latin jazz a lot because I get to play percussion, which is something else that I do that I really enjoy. So whenever I can combine the two, I'm happy. So I really enjoy doing it. I try to work in that genre as much as I can.
So how did you become a member of Jimmy Buffett's Coral Reefer Band?
Well, that happened as a result of another friend of mine named Ed Kaye, who is a Miami area saxophone player. He's got a few albums out under his name, too. He had done some studio work for Jimmy in Miami. Apparently they called him they were looking to expand the group. I guess at the time Amy Lee was playing sax, and that was it. And they were looking to add another sax player and a trumpet player. So I guess he called, or somebody from the organization called Ed for some recommendations. Ed had recommended me, so I got a call from, I believe it was the tour manager at the time, and I was working at Circuit City full time. I was a sales manager at Circuit City, basically working full time. They just said send a tape and a bio and a picture, which I did. not even thinking that anything would come of it, because I've had a lot of those kind of offers over the years, particularly back then, and I'd already sort of stopped playing music on a regular basis because I'd been in Circuit City for about 3 years, something I had had to do as a result of not being able to find enough work, in the Miami area. So I sort of just did it as a lark, or on a lark, not thinking I would ever hear back from them. But about 2 weeks later, I got the call back when they offered me the job. I decided, well, I'm going to try this.
And here you are.
And here I am, 16 years later.
What did you think of Jimmy Buffett when you met him?
I thought he was great. Very nice guy. Really a pleasure to work with. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
When playing with the Coral Reefer Band, what tunes have you really enjoyed playing on?
Well, there's quite a few. Of course, I really enjoyed playing on the songs that I get a little solo on. So Pencil Thin Mustache, Halloween in Tijuana is great because I get kind of a Latin type solo on that. And then the other things that required the full horn section, when we had the full horn section, I just loved doing that. And any of those songs were great.
You just mentioned the song Halloween in Tijuana,
yeah.
Desperation Samba.
Desperation.
That's something that you added a lot to, and I really liked the work on Cinco de Mayo in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
What song do you think you've really put your stamp on?
Well, as far as recordings go,
recordings were in the live performance.
In the live performance, I guess I would have to say Pencil Thin Mustache. I mean, it's a pretty simple tune, but the trumpet solo adds a real New Orleans flavor to it, which I think is pretty appealing, and I really enjoy it. I don't know if I've really put my stamp on anything else other than that, The Cinco de Mayo thing was something that we did in the studio, and it was not written out. I just sort of followed along with what Robert Greenwich was doing on the pans. But that was kind of an interesting little piece, I thought, and just kind of off the cuff, not planned out.
It came out really well.
Yeah, I thought so.
Is there a member of the Coral Reefer Band you feel especially close to?
No, not really. Everybody gets along really well. I can't think of any one person I feel any closer to than anybody else.
I remember T.C. Mitchell, he was telling me after I did an interview with him, he said, I'll tell you who I'd love you to get a hold of. I said, I'd love you to get a hold of John Lovell.
Oh.
He said, I'd love to hear it, just what he has to say.
Oh.
So he's going to get to hear it.
Well, I get to talk to Tom every now and then. He lives right down the street from me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. We literally live about 10 houses from each other.
So how did you get the nickname of Johnny Martini? I've always wondered that.
Yeah, well, that happened during the Domino College tour, which I think was 92 or 90. No, it was 93 or 94. It was one of my first tours. And the reason that whole name came about, actually, that was Jimmy's idea, because we were sitting around. I think we were in Dallas, and we were all sitting around the table having martinis, which was one of my favorite drinks at the time. I would always order a martini. So we just happened to sit there, and I just happened to order a martini, and he just looked at me and said, Johnny Martini. We had a little laugh. And then from that, I don't know if it was that year or the year after, this Domino College tour, they were looking for a character to come out and do the soliloquy on, what's the name of the tune? Gypsies in the Palace. There's the soliloquy in front. So I was volunteered. I volunteered, but I was volunteered as well to come out and do it as Johnny Martini, and sort of a character act. Johnny Martini is sort of like an old Vegas musician who drinks a little too much. So I did it. We started putting this thing together, and it just kind of evolved into this character, Johnny Martini. And then we started finding other things for me to do during other portions of the show. I would go up and stand with the girls and sing with them, and they would start me out in this white tuxedo that looked perfect, and then progressively got more tattered by the end of the show, so that when I came out and did my soliloquy on Gypsies, I looked like I had tire tracks on the back of the tuxedo. It was torn and ripped, and I looked like I just got up from the Bowery.
So you actually sang in the show?
I didn't sing. I just pretended to sing.
Oh, okay.
I basically danced. I mean, I got up with the girls and just kind of danced around, acted goofy.
There's a Latin jazz artist named Sammy. Tell us about your experience with him and his band Latin Jazz Explosion.
Oh, well, that's Sammy Figueroa, his Latin Jazz Explosion. Yeah, he had this band in Miami before I got involved with him. The band had been together and had just used a saxophone. Been together for about a year, and they were playing around the Miami area. The bass player for that band, his name is Nicky Orta. He plays in our band with Jeff Taylor, Oop Shabam. And he just mentioned me once. He said, hey, you ought to come out and just sit in with us sometime to see how that would work out. He thought I would enjoy it. So they had some kind of a little concert that they did on the beach one evening, and he said, come on out and bring your horn and just sit in, which I did. And it worked out. It worked out really well. I just started playing them after that on a regular basis.
There's a really soothing piece on the album that he has called "And Sammy Walk In," Sammy Figueroa, and it's called Mirage.
Oh yeah.
And I was hoping you could tell us about that song.
Well, that's one of my songs. It was a song that I'd written several years earlier. Just had the opportunity to bring it in to see if it would work out for that particular format, and it did. So we started performing it quite a bit, and when we had a chance to do the album, he wanted to include it on the album, which I was real happy about.
That answers the next question about your song. I was going to ask if you write many songs.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, have you ever thought of a solo album?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've thought of it.
Is there
That's as far as it's gotten.
No plans to record anything?
Yeah, I have plans to do something. Yeah, I just have to find the right people to do it with, and the right people to record it. That's going to take a little time, but I'm planning on doing something. I have nothing, hard and set right at the moment, but I'm definitely thinking about doing it.
So tell us about the band Oop Bop Shabang.
Well, it's a cover band basically. We did some original material for the album that we did, but it's basically a cover band, and we actually started as a swing band back when swing was enjoying a little resurgence in popularity, and we were working around town doing swing gigs, and we would just kind of dress the part with the ties and whatnot, and then we landed this gig in Fort Lauderdale at Mango's, and it was 2 nights a week to start with. Sort of where we ended up. At some point, the management there got tired of the swing. They were looking to change the group, and when Jeff went to him and said, "Hey, look, we're just doing the swing thing because that's what we thought you wanted. I mean, if you want us to do some other things, it's no problem." So now we've sort of evolved into we play a little bit of everything. We play everything from Sinatra to disco, but we're all jazz players. When it's not too crowded in the club and we don't feel like we have to play a lot of dance music, we slip in a lot of jazz stuff for our own benefit.
I'll tell you, Jeff Taylor has a fantastic voice.
He's very
really
talented. Does. Yeah, he's really a great singer. I really enjoy working with him. He's one of my best friends as well. The guy's great talent, great guitar player.
Who out there do you especially respect as a trumpet player?
Well, there's a lot. John Swanna is, I think, one of my favorite trumpet players right now. I like Nicholas Payton a lot. A lot of these younger players like Terrell Stafford. And, there's a young trumpet player in New York who is, I think he just graduated from Juilliard. He's a friend of Ralph's, Etienne Charles, really great player. Other than that, Bobby Shue is another one that I've been listening to a lot lately. It's Bobby Shue. He's got a great album called Salsa Caliente. Great album. Great player.
Do you have a favorite memory as a musician?
A favorite memory? Wow, well, there's so many. It'd be hard pressed to pick a favorite memory. Yeah, that's a tough. Not really. I don't have a.
There's too many to pick from.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dwell on any particular memory.
When someone hears you perform, whether on a recording or in person, what is it that you hope the listener gets out of the experience?
Well, just basically enjoyment. That's what we're up there, to do. I hope that they're getting some sense of enjoyment. It's entertainment, bottom line. And when it's not Jimmy Buffett, which is primarily entertainment, but it's also musical. If it's a jazz kind of a thing where it's a smaller group and it's a little more musically challenging, then you hope that, people come away with an interest in that as well.
Traveling around, you've had the chance to visit a lot of cities. What is your favorite place to play out of?
Well, my favorite city or favorite venue that we play with Jimmy? Or
kind of a little bit of both.
Well, my favorite city that I really enjoy is Chicago. I just really love the city, and I kind of grew up in Indianapolis, so it's a city that I've known for quite some time. There's a lot going on there musically, nightlife and whatnot. In New York City, we're going to New York in a couple of days, and I'm going to be out hitting the clubs, listening to whoever's out there from the jazz world. So I'd have to say those 2 cities are my favorites.
When you're on the road, what is it that you like to do when you're not performing?
I like to sit in my room and Google on my computer. And the other thing I like to do is, this is what I used to do anyway. I don't do it as much anymore. My big thing was visiting used bookstores.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I collect used books, and so I would find a bookstore or 2 or 3 in whatever town we were in, and I'd just make a beeline there, and I'd come home with boxes of books. And the same with CDs. I would always look for a used CD store. I spent a lot of my time doing that. And then I practice a lot. I try to practice a couple hours a day when I'm on the road. I've got a mute that I can put in the trumpet, so I don't bother anybody. I can usually put in 2-3 hours a day. So I try to do that.
I have 2 final questions.
Mm-hmm.
This question is serious.
Okay.
It sounds like a joke, but a lot of people, I found that you really find out a lot about the person's personality, and it always reveals a little gem. What is your all-time favorite meal?
My all-time favorite meal that I've had or that I would like to have?
Both.
Let's see, my all-time favorite meal. My all-time favorite meal was at a restaurant in North Miami Beach with my wife. I'm trying to think of the name of the restaurant because I haven't eaten there in a while. The chef's name is Militello. That's his last name. I'm trying to think of his first name. Fantastic meal. Italian, my favorite food. So this is incredible. Plus, we're good. I can't remember. I'd like to plug him, but I can't remember.
Everybody needs to go Google that name. Then
yeah, Militello. You Google Militello and his I'm sure the restaurants will come up.
The last question, thanks to technology, this is going out all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
My last question, what would you, Mr. John Lovell, like to say to the world?
I hate those kind of questions. I have nothing to say to the world except hello, I'm here. Check us out. I have nothing important to say other than I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing.
Well, I think that's actually a pretty good statement. But there's a lot of people that aren't happy with what they're doing.
There's a lot of people that aren't. You know, I'm very lucky. I consider myself to be very lucky to be doing what I'm doing.
Well, I'd like to thank you, sir, for the interview and
Sure.
for keeping the music alive.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.